Welcome to Friday edition. It's my favorite day of the week, obviously, as it is for most people, but especially because during this week, this program, we do a weekend review, and then I'm off to do special report tonight, so tune in with Brett Baer. I think maybe Shannon's in for Brett tonight at 6 p.m. over at Fox News. I begin, as I do on most Fridays when we're lucky, with John Ellis, editor-in-chief of News Items, the one newsletter that really does away with the need for all of them other ones that do the news. John, let's start with AI today because you've been covering it extensively in News Items, and now there's a backlash, and I'm kind of happy that there's a backlash. Tell us about it.
Well, there's a group called the Future of Life, which put out a statement this week calling for the prevention of superintelligence. Superintelligence being the point where AI intelligence exceeds that of human intelligence. And, you know, it was signed by religious leaders and politicians and financial people and others. But what was most interesting to me was the two people who signed it. One was Jeff Hinton, who is known as the godfather of AI, Nobel Prize-winning computer scientist, and a truly remarkable man in many ways. And the other person who signed it, to my surprise, was Steve Bannon, who is obviously known to your listeners, an advisor to President Trump and the host of the War Room, I think they call it. And when I saw Steve's name there, I thought, I've been sort of thinking about with the technology racing so far ahead of us normal human beings, would there be a backlash? And it struck me that Steve being part of this letter was an indication that a backlash was beginning to come together. And I think not only in the sphere of AI, but I think maybe especially so in the sphere of genetic modification. We're seeing embryos modified by scientists today. And I think the combination of AI running ahead of us and genetic modification running ahead of us is going to create a political backlash. I don't think we'll see it in the midterms, but I'm almost certain it'll be a major issue in the presidential campaign in 2028.
You know, John, I don't know Steve Bannon except for a brief phone call 8 years ago and a meeting 15 years ago that lasted about 2 minutes. And so I think, though, I'm guessing, I think he's pretty traditional Catholic. And if so, we'll mirror the positions of people like Ryan Anderson and Ed Whalen and others over at the Ethics and Public Policy Center who are very concerned, as I am, about embryo manipulation via the genome and AI. But I'm wondering, you can have a gazillion people sign a letter, and if none of them have regulatory authority, it doesn't mean anything. The EU is the only one trying to it's kind of a reverse tragedy of the commons. Everyone is not using the same stuff. Everyone's going in their own direction. And no matter what the letter says, China's going to go fast, so we have to go faster, don't we?
Well, the answer to everything, if you're in the AI business, is China, right? So somebody says this is getting ahead of us, and you know we should regulate it, and so on and so forth. And the answer always coming back is, if we don't do it first, China will do it first. Therefore, we have to do it first. And it's the Trump card, essentially, not Donald Trump card, but the Trump card in this argument. And I'm not sure how you get around it, because indeed the Chinese will. If they can, get there first. And if they get there first in AI, and especially if they get there first in quantum computing, then, you know, then our national security is at enormous risk. They could break any code, et cetera.
Is it possible in your reading, and again, News Items covers AI better than anything, and if you're an investor in this space, you really need to read News Items. But is there any way to separate out the human biology experimentation from everything else that AI is doing? For example, hypersonic missile targeting, intelligence penetration, surveillance technique, because that stuff is what China is interested in. I don't know that, can we do that? Can we separate out the biology like George W. Bush did at the beginning of his term having to do with embryonic stem cells? Had a big panel. They came up with conclusions that got overtaken by 9/11.
that is a because there's a very strong and 50-year-old right to life movement, and because it's extremely well organized, well funded, knows how to play the political field, if you will, in state legislatures and in Congress. If that movement focuses on genetic modification of human beings, then I think they will have success passing legislation, etc. If they get to genetic modification of anything, they're not going to have success because, for instance, the agriculture industry,
Right.
the big ag is not going to say you can't do genetically modified foods, and in fact, you do need genetically modified foods to feed a global population of 8 billion people.
Yeah, there's a guy up in Minnesota, Iowa claims him, Norman Borlaug, who did genetically modified seeds. It feeds the world, so we're in favor of that. But human beings, not so much. Let's talk now about essential tremor is a progressive neurological disorder, and it's associated with Parkinson's, but not exclusively so. What's the breakthrough here?
So I interviewed we just started this one-on-one podcast at News Items, and the first person I interviewed, which I'll post tomorrow, is a woman named Jane Metcalf, who's the founder of Wired Magazine. She's done all of this stuff on the neo-biological revolution, and she's on the board of the foundation of the Focused Ultrasound Group. And she tells a story of a woman who was a nurse, and she suffered essential tremors, so she couldn't, hold a glass without spilling the water. She couldn't obviously do an injection because she'd stab somebody in the wrong place, and it was ruining her life. And this ultrasound technology. I mean, you and I think about ultrasound technology as a woman is pregnant and they put the gel on her tummy, and they look around. You can see on the screen the baby, but focused ultrasound combined with the most advanced MRI can find the exact place in the brain where the where the circuit isn't working, and thus the woman has essential tremor, right? And this has been done, and there's no, you don't have to open up anybody's head or anything. You find the MRI locates the precise point where the circuit is not switching correctly, and the focused ultrasound goes in there without hurting any of the tissue around it. And that woman left the hospital that day and didn't have the shakes.
Now, have they repeated that? Are they able to reproduce the same effect? Okay.
I was stunned. I mean, I had read there was one item in News Items like 3 months ago that said, focused ultrasound did something, and I put it in there because it sounded sort of interesting. But then I talked to Jane about it. She's on the board, obviously knowledgeable about what they're doing, and I'm going to interview the guy who's, probably in 2 weeks, I'm going to interview the guy who is the head of it, Focused Ultrasound Foundation. And so I'll know more then. But it is they're in 185 locations all around the United States, which I was
my goodness,
to me.
People are gonna rush to that. People with tremors are gonna rush to that. Well,
there's one thing which is, this is early stage, right? I mean, this is not something that if you have Parkinson's, you go in and you're fixed. That's not where it's at. But it has enormous promise, and as I say, we're going to interview.
I'm sure ears perked up all over the driving community. I want to make sure we mention. I invest in Palantir. It's the only stock I own, individual aside from mutual funds. And I read already this week in News Items, the biggest danger to some of the AI stocks is radical innovation within the sector itself. So I immediately thought, how big of a danger for Palantir? And I have to figure that out. I'm not looking for investment advice, but how is that the buzz among the AI stocks, is that they're going to outthink each other into oblivion?
Well, so we read every day that the AI stocks are they account for whatever 70 or 50% of the gain in the Nasdaq, and the PE ratios are insane, and et cetera, et cetera. It's got to be a bubble. It's got to be a bubble, and to some degree, obviously, it is, but it's not like Google or OpenAI or Meta are going to collapse, and somebody is going to come in with a different way to build the chip that uses a lot less energy, that's a lot faster, and that we don't know what innovation is out there that's going to change sort of change the playing field, but there is one coming, and therefore it's not so much a bubble that you have to worry about if you're Meta. It's the innovation out of nowhere that may upset.
It's a silver bullet being fired from far away that you don't know is en route. John Ellis from News Items, always a pleasure. Go and look at News Items. You can find it on Google, John Ellis News Items, and they'll take you there. You'll be smarter. Eli Lake is the host of the fabulous podcast, Breaking History. He's a contributor to the Free Press. Breaking History ought to be in your feed. The most recent one I've listened to is London Falling, about the collapse of free speech in the United Kingdom. I have not yet listened to the new one on murder in Detroit. Eli, that's from my drive tomorrow.
That's a trailer for our new podcast series with Franny Block. It's terrific. I highly recommend it.
I want to go back to London Falling because yesterday Keir Starmer got wiped out. Labour got wiped out in by-elections in Wales, and that's unheard of. I think a lot of it has to do with what you covered in the podcast last week. Tell people about it.
Well, what I covered was I wanted to look kind of at a long view of why is it that we have seen, and the statistic is absolutely harrowing, 33 arrests a day in the United Kingdom for basically social media related crimes. You post something that is seen of giving general offense, potentially inciting violence, spreading or stirring up hatred. And this is become a new reality where the police will come at your door and sometimes they won't arrest you, but it'll be called a non-crime hate incident. And, spurred by a neighbor or somebody who may have seen something you posted online. And I wanted to contrast that with this, in my view, very noble tradition in British history of making the initial arguments and kind of explaining the value of free inquiry and free exchange of ideas and the basis of free speech, to which our great country, America, I think has a certain kind of debt to elements of British history, like what we've seen in the Glorious Revolution or the arguments of John Locke and John Stuart Mill. So how did the country that gave us free speech become a censor's paradise?
And I was unaware of the critical law. There is an act of parliament that opened the door to this, to really sub rosa. And I wanted to add, our First Amendment was in reaction, a progression from the Glorious Revolution, but also a reaction against Elizabethan licensing laws. We did not want those to come here, ever. We didn't want licensing of the press or of theater or anything like that. But when did that's a Cameron law, isn't it a Cameron era law that opened the door to this?
Well, there are several. It's really Tony Blair, I believe, is the one who kind of gets the ball rolling. When what he does is he has a kind of human rights legislation that relates back to the EU's notion of human rights. And until then, the common law tradition in the United Kingdom, which had always had bouts of censorship, even though it also kind of had the intellectual ferment for free speech, but it flipped. Before it was, if there wasn't explicit language saying, you couldn't say something, then it was permitted. To now, the framework was that, there was a certain kind of principle that would define what free speech was. And then there were a series of laws. It wasn't just Tony Blair, it was Cameron, you're correct. Theresa May at one point tried to define hate speech in such a way without really defining it. And then there's also a culture of enforcement with the police inside the United Kingdom, really kind of buying into what we might call the woke ideology. There was a kind of there's just the bureaucratic inertia that these are easier to do than investigating and arresting suspects for real crimes, and quotas had to be met and things like that. So it's a real nightmare at this point. And I think, I focused on some of the stuff having to do with speech having to do with immigration and skepticism about trans issues, but the left is also being punished now on this as well. So it's not all moving in one direction. And that's why I think you've got this electoral response that you're talking about in Wales.
No, it's an earthquake, literally an earthquake. If you're a United Kingdom politics follower, losing Wales for Labour is unheard of. It would
Yes.
be like the Republicans losing Texas or Florida. I want to ask you briefly, Eli, since you're our historian in residence, are you going to do a breaking history on White House renovations? Because this has been hilarious this week. President Obama did a $300 million deal, but we're not quite sure what it was. Might have been underground. Teddy Roosevelt built the West Wing. The East Wing is like the least loved part of the White House for anyone who's ever worked there, like I have. Nobody cares unless you work for the First Lady. Well, we need a ballroom. Are you intrigued by this, the outcry and the reality of White House renovation?
Well, I think the way to understand it, Hugh, is we've increasingly become a visual culture. I talked about this on commentary this week, but I really think it's the image that you're showing right now on the screen. It's the wrecking ball at the White House. And then that becomes a metaphor for a bunch of things that have nothing to do with whether the president went through the right historical commissions to approve his renovations that he's going to do. I think you're totally correct on the merits, but I think people are responding to, they see the wrecking ball and they think of a whole bunch of other things that have nothing to do with this that they oppose. And also a very good idea, like a kind of a shorter episode on the history of the White House, how it's changed, from the horrors of the War of 1812 to the present, I think is a great idea.
Well, there's so much to be done, and you're so good at this stuff that I also want to compliment you on Gaza and your coverage of Gaza. But Haviv Redigor did a big deep dive into Gaza this week for Ask Haviv Anything, but it wasn't simple enough. And I'm wondering, do you intentionally keep in mind like the average seventh grader when you do your stuff? Who are you aiming for?
I like to think I think you have to. I think it appeals to somebody who is curious. So I write the scripts for a general audience, and basically somebody who could read the New York Times or the Economist. But I'm not trying. I mean, if a precocious seventh grader is listening, I'll take all the listeners I can get. So
I'm just trying to maybe encourage.
Yeah,
I would encourage some AP history teachers to start dealing in breaking history because it's fabulous, it's visual, and it's terrific. Eli Lake, always fun to see you. Follow him on X at Eli Lake, and we'll talk next Friday. Time for my relief factor, America, because I got my 3 miles in. I'm almost back to full. Got a little bit sparky. The hamstring was bothering me a little bit, but time to take my relief factor. There it is in my hand if you're watching on the Salem News Channel. 4 pills. My Karen Kirkman, resveratrol, and Omega. A lot of driving this weekend, so I want to make sure I take some with me in my pocket. I'll put it in the car. I'm always telling you, put Relief Factor where you won't forget to take it, and you'll feel better every day that you do. It's for minor aches and pains. It replaces the Tylenol and the Advil and the Aleve. You just ought to use the natural supplements that help your body's anti-inflammatory system. Get rid of those minor aches and pains that come with exercise and aging. You might be a weekend warrior. If you're getting ready to do a big Friday week workout, then don't forget your Relief Factor. Starter pack $19.95, and you call 1-800-4-RELIEF, 1-800-4 in the word relief, or go to the website relieffactor.com. Get that starter pack, $19.95, less than $1 a day at relieffactor.com. And please don't forget, over at hughhewitt.com, at the top, there's a banner for the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. IFCJ is involved in a big fundraising effort to bring relief to people exhausted, wearied, and impoverished by the war of 2 years duration in Israel. Every contribution from $25, $50, $100 deeply appreciated in their resilience centers and their soup kitchens. A lot of people are worn out from a 2-year war in Israel, and we want to help them. And the IFCJ is sponsoring this fund drive. Please be generous. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. Matt Continetti joins me. Matt is with the American Enterprise Institute, the Free Press, Commentary Magazine's Washington columnist and contributor to the Commentary podcast, friend of this program. I love to stump Continetti whenever possible, so I think I have him stumped. Matt Continetti, do you know what a longer lateral is?
A longer lateral.
Yeah.
Other than a football pass
No.
that goes farther than usual, I can't think of an answer, Hugh.
No, there are three terms. There is the a sideways pass in football. A longer lateral technical definition is where you drill down for oil or natural gas, and then you go lateral. So it's sort of slant drilling, but it's not slant drilling. You go deep, and then you go
fracking.
Left or right. Fracking. And longer lateral is the name of the podcast hosted by Ann Bradbury, who's a client of the show, the sponsor of the show, the American Exploration Production Council. And I spent some time last night talking to Energy Secretary Chris Wright about longer laterals. It's a big deal. We can get a lot more oil and gas out of the United States if we choose to do it. And that podcast is fabulous. It's over at the axpc.org website and their YouTube channel. Matt, I've got 7 topics we got to run through. I tried to arrange them in order of importance. I want to begin with China and Putin meeting Xi meeting Trump next week in South Korea. What are the stakes? What do you think is going to come out of this?
I think the stakes are high. We were talking about the trade relationship between the two biggest economies in the world, the United States and China. Of course, there are security issues as well with Taiwan, the Indo-Pacific, that the two countries have been tense over at times. Trump's trying to relax tensions, I think. He wants a good trade deal. He wants to befriend Xi Jinping once again. So I think they're likely to come up with some way to avoid kind of the worst outcome here in terms of tariffs. But Hugh, what I think is important is to take a step back and look at how the Trump administration is decoupling the United States from China. When you think about the different rare earths minerals deals that this administration has made, most recently with Australia, when you look at how the Trump administration has used the Commerce Department's investment accelerator to take equity stakes in these companies that are tied to critical supply chains, whether it's Intel, you have the Defense Department actually taking ownership of a rare earths company. These are measures that you don't normally associate with a conservative administration, but I think they're all part of a larger strategy to get America in a position where we're not so dependent on China for these critical industries in the event that our relationship goes south fast.
Now, I have a little nightmare scenario, Matt. We're sending an aircraft carrier to the Caribbean. It's been a long time since Southern Command got a carrier down there to go with our other armada that is putting pressure on Venezuela and possibly even Colombia. My nightmare scenario is that Trump and Xi just agree, we're going to take back South America into our sphere of influence and you can have Taiwan. Does that worry you, or is in fact the aircraft carrier a way to tell Xi that if you move on Taiwan, we move on all of your clients in South America?
Yeah, I'm interested in this new approach to China in the second Trump administration. It's a little bit less focused on security and Taiwan and more focused on economics and supply chains. Part of that does have to deal with Latin America. Remember, we started this term with the fight over the Panama Canal.
Panama Canal.
Trump's desire to reassert our control over the Panama Canal. And then, of course, our association with Argentina and our plans to help Javier Milei there, I think, are related to efforts to block China from taking more market share in Argentina. And then, of course, there's the drug war. I thought it was very interesting that Trump mentioned his intent to bring up fentanyl at the top of his conversation with Xi Jinping. So drawing a connection between the precursor chemicals that are made in China and then trafficked through Latin America into the United States of America, where they're poison our citizens. So Trump's been flexing his muscles, whether it's Operation Midnight Hammer, whether it's the ceasefire agreement and hostage deal, or now it's kind of escalating our presence in the Caribbean in order to exert pressure on the cartels and on Maduro and Petro, as you mentioned. China notices it all, I'm sure.
And when I come back with Matt, we're going to be talking about the shutdown and the East Wing renovation and gambling. And during the break, we're going to talk about the fentanyl problem and the strikes on the boats, which President Trump says he's well within his constitutional authority. I'll ask Senator Kennedy about that coming up next hour as well. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be back with Continetti. I'll talk to him during the break. It'll be on the Big Weekend Pod. Stay tuned.
The Hugh Hewitt Show is now available on TV. Go to SalemNewsChannel.com or download the app. You can also watch on Roku and Fire Stick. Salem News Channel, the antidote to the mainstream media.
Welcome back, America. I've got Matt Continetti with me. Matt, I was sitting in the green room last night with Annie Linsky, talented reporter for the Wall Street Journal, and a clip played of President Trump saying 300,000 Americans had died from fentanyl. And both Annie and I said, that's a new number. I hadn't heard it. So I did some research. A Pulitzer was awarded to Reuters this year for a 7-part series that put the number of Americans dead because of fentanyl at 450,000 people. Does that number surprise you?
I'm afraid not. Hugh, I've been tracking this story for almost a decade now. I think the deaths of despair that took our country in the past 10 years, leading to premature deaths among Americans from alcoholism, from drugs, from opioids, and then from fentanyl, has inflicted a tremendous toll on our country. I think it's contributed to the rise of populism and to the rise of Donald Trump, who has always affiliated himself with the victims of this drug trafficking and abuse. And so we're in a situation where sometimes, we've had years where more people die of opioids than were killed throughout the American involvement in Vietnam. And devastation on that scale, I think, is why you see President Trump take this very aggressive approach in the past few months against the drug dealers and traffickers.
I was asked by Brett last night, is it constitutional? And I said, I have no problem. There are areas to which the commander-in-chief authority does not extend. This is not one of them. I'm perfectly happy with him blowing up narco boats, and I trust our intel. Are you?
Yeah, my colleague Jed Rubenfeld of Yale Law School had an excellent piece on this subject at the Free Press, Hugh, exploring the constitutionality of the strikes on the drug traffickers. He says he went into it thinking that the constitutionality of these measures was doubtful, but he found that it was much more complicated than he expected. And I do think what's happening right now falls under the president's Article II authority as commander-in-chief of the United States. But I would also like Congress to ask a little bit more questions, draw the administration further out on what their strategy is. What's the end game here?
I'll talk to Senator Kennedy about it when he comes on next hour. But I'll tell you right now, I think Jed Rubenfeld is very smart. I'm not surprised he got there. It's as Justice Jackson said I think it's Steel Seizure cases. The precedents we have are like Joseph's dreams. Anyone can read them any way they want. And I think the president can bomb narco boats. Don't go anywhere, America. Matt Continetti's back to weigh in on the East Wing when we come back. Matt Continetti, columnist of The World, actually, and the author of The Right, An Intellectual History of Conservatism in America, which I would also recommend to you. Matt, there's a government shutdown, there's a remodel of the East Wing and the building of a ballroom, and there's the gambling scandal. I know which one I think is most important, but which one do you think is most important?
I think the shutdown is the most important of those three stories, but I have to tell you, the gambling scandal is nipping at its heels.
Yeah, well, I agree. And the East Wing, can we dismiss that as being the silly trigger on the left-wing media?
I would love to dismiss the East Wing story, Hugh, but I can't because of what it's revealed about the mental state of the American left. I had never thought that people would be so traumatized by Donald Trump's reelection that the remodeling of a part of the White House that no one has given any thought to since it was constructed 80 years ago would send people into such a hysteria. And so I think it's very revealing of where the left and the Democrats and liberals in the media are right now, is that even in places where they could have stories to talk about Donald Trump and his actions. Take the drug war we were discussing, take some of the pardons that have been happening. Rather than focus on that, they are driven mad by the sight of these steam shovels and bulldozers on the White House lawn.
Well, I think what's really bothering him is Donald Trump leaving a permanent impact on the footprint of the White House. That's what really is bothering them. It's always going to be the Trump ballroom. They might change the name, but it'll always be like TR built the West Wing. Trump is building the new East Wing and ballroom. But on the shutdown, if Republicans had allowed the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program for poor people, it's food for poor people, to go unfunded and therefore lapse. So they give people cards to go to the grocery store and buy food. What would the media be like on that, Matt Continetti?
Well, we'd be hearing nonstop headlines about the cruelty of Republicans. You know, you could also say what would happen if Republicans were voting down paying the troops during a government shutdown. You would hear nonstop talk of how Republicans are endangering national security. Instead, we're kind of in this limbo shutdown where Chuck Schumer is telling people that every day it gets better for the Democratic Party. It's the same kind of illogic that led him to shut down the government in the first place. I think it's a disaster for the Democrats, Hugh. I really do. There's no end game here. That if they prolong it even further, then their these Obamacare subsidies are going to lapse, and they'll never be restored. So I really don't know what they're thinking.
Well, I also wonder, I've already voted for Winsome Sears and Jason Miyares. My vote can't change, but a lot of government employees in Northern Virginia are very smart people, and they know why they're not getting paid. Do you think there's any way it helps Abigail Spanberger, world's worst candidate?
I think the Democrats believe so, and that this is why that we'd expect the shutdown to persist until after Election Day. But I don't know whether that type of cynical argument that, oh, well, we'll continue to keep the government shut down so that the government employees in Northern Virginia will vote for the Democratic candidate. I don't know if that cynical ploy flies anymore. You know, we live in a very different environment. The liberal media has much less control over the information flows as it used to. I think most people, even people in the center, recognize that it's the Democrats who are responsible for this shutdown, and that the government would reopen in a minute if the Democrats
I agree, Matt.
give the votes.
There is no narrative, or there are actually 1,000 narratives, and none of them dominate. I do want to get to the gambling story. I don't gamble except a flyer on the Browns winning the Super Bowl every other year. That's it, and only because it's a passion play and it's a stupid blind luck might happen. Yeah, it's a lightning strike. I think there's a big story here, and I'm going to talk about it on Special Report tonight. I think the college athletics are really threatened because a lot of those kids are never going to play in any league that pays them anything. They have a payday opportunity, illegal though it might be. They don't face a lifetime sanction. What do you think is the extent of the gambling scandal?
Oh, I think it's deep, and I think the Supreme Court is responsible for it. On many levels. I mean, whether it was the Supreme Court decision that essentially created what we have as this nationalized online betting market that has become entangled with our professional sports leagues, or the Supreme Court decision on the NILs, which creates now the opportunities you're talking about for the young athletes to become ensnared in the same type of corruption and favor trading. I think this is a lesson in how much harm the court can do, even when it doesn't intend to. I'm very concerned about this. Americans love professional sports, and our love of professional sports rests on the integrity of the game. And there have been cheating scandals in basketball before in recent years, but something of this magnitude, drawing in the mafia and illegal poker games in one of the cases, I think will really sour people on the NBA at a time when the season's actually off to a really exciting and interesting start. So I hope the league does something to address this. And more importantly, I hope it leads us to reevaluate the way in which we've allowed these online betting platforms to kind of assimilate into the national pastimes, like some type of Borg from Star Trek or something.
It is a Borg. Now,
It really,
now I want to
it hurts
close.
the game and it hurts people too.
Now, I want to close. I'll take you into the break to do this. I thought you'd been sent to Podhoret's prison because you vanished for a couple of weeks. In fact, you're in India. And I am Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, loves India. President Trump loves India. Did you love India?
I was awed by India. I think that's the best way to do it. India overwhelmed me, Hugh. I'm still trying to process how I feel. I'll tell you this about India. There's more of everything, and it happens all at once. And so there's really no country that I've ever been to quite like it. It's something else. How can you not love it?
Well, I've never been. Dr. Arnn is the same way. All of his students want to go to India. And which cities did you go to, Matt?
I was in New Delhi, I was in Hyderabad, and I was in Ahmedabad, which is in the home state of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who I got to meet and
Are you
convey
gonna write this up
American
for the Free Press?
salutations to. You know, I was doing the hard business of foreign policy, Hugh, diplomatic outreach.
I'm glad to hear it. Matt Continetti, we don't have to do the overtime now. I'm looking forward to reading something about it in the Free Press or in commentary soon. Follow him on X at Continetti. Thank you, Matt. I am not one for book parties because they're too loud and I'm usually hoarse by the end of them. But I went to Brett Baer's last night. Ambassador Taiba of the UAE put it on, and a Washington, D.C. book party is so beltway. A lot of young journos, great to talk to them, like to encourage them. Got a chance to chat with Senator Fetterman, but it was Chris Wright, is the Energy Secretary, and he was so gracious, as was his wife, and we had a chance to chat a little bit. And I told him I had talked with Ann Bradbury that day and about longer laterals. And Secretary Wright is an oil and gas man, so he knows what a longer lateral is. That's the name of the podcast for the American Exploration and Production Council. They are sponsors of this show. They are not sponsors of this segment. They are not on today. I just want to tell you about longer laterals because Ann Bradbury blew me away. She just knows so much about permitting, like a permitting lawyer should. But I'm a permitting lawyer, and she's not. And so Chris Wright and I stood around talking about longer laterals and the fact that energy is freedom. He's a dynamo, like Doug Burgum. It's just fabulous. And I want to recommend you go to axpc.org and find Longer Laterals with Ann Bradbury, or find their YouTube session and watch it so that you get smart on energy. We need a lot of it. We need all kinds of it, all of the above where it makes sense, and we need permitting reform. Also want to tell you about Conservatives for Lower Health Care Costs. All right, now that makes sense. How do we do that? By controlling the appetites of Big Pharma and by going to the website pharmawindfall.com. Now, we are not in favor of a pharma windfall. They've had too many before. They got a big one in Obamacare. The gift that keeps on giving to Big Pharma is Obamacare. But they also got enormous bags of gold in COVID-1 and COVID-2 and in Operation Warp Speed because we needed what they do. And so we threw money at the problem. It worked. God bless them. They don't need any more. They don't need another handout. And they got more lobbyists than oil and gas combined with the car industry combined with agriculture. They're all over the place, Big Pharma. So add your voice to those encouraging President Trump to continue his stand against another handout for Big Pharma by going to pharmawindfall.com. And thanks to Conservatives for Lower Health Care Costs for doing that. Also want to mention Americans for Free Markets, forfreemarkets.com, F-O-R, freemarkets.com, forfreemarkets.com. Because we also don't like debanking. President Trump put an end to that, debanking of people involved in conservative action groups or conservative individuals of high profile being turned down at different banks for the operations of their 501c3s, C4s, because the banks just did not want the left and coming down on their case. They're scaredy cats. That's over now, thanks to President Trump, but let's keep it over, put it into law. Banking neutrality when it comes to politics. Head over to For Free Markets, F-O-R, for freemarkets.com, forfreemarkets.com, and then come back. Senator John Kennedy is next, got a brand new #1 Amazon bestseller that you're going to hear about. Great new book out, How to Test Negative for Stupid and Why Washington Never Will. by Senator John Kennedy. If you're an aficionado of Fox News and any other cable station, you've seen Senator Kennedy a lot because he's the funniest man in the Senate, and I don't think anyone will be mad at me for saying that. But he's also very sly, because you would not know he got his master's or his second law degree from Oxford's Magdalen College after doing Louisiana Tech, Vanderbilt, UVA, Fifth Circuit clerkship, then Oxford. So that's all an act. Senator Kennedy, welcome. Good to have you. Congratulations on How to Test Negative for Stupid. Very funny book. But I also now know what a bush hog means, or to bush hog. That's a verb, to bush hog, right?
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. Look, the book is not, it's not a policy book per se. It's a story book. I use stories to talk about policy, and some of the stories are funny, some are bizarre. They're all true. I use stories to make 3 points. I try to tell and explain to people what the inside of the Senate's really like. To try to explain to people why in Washington, D.C., normal is just a setting on the clothes dryer, and to try to explain to folks why it doesn't have to be that way if we have a return to some common sense. I hope the book is, I think it's far-reaching. I hope it makes people think. I hope it makes them laugh. It could make them day drink.
No, I don't think it's going to do that. I think it's going to make them laugh, and therefore I think it's going to make them take you very seriously. The funniest line, by the way, people nominate funny lines all the time. Here's how long I've known Mark McKinnon. I knew him when he was poor. I hope there's no index in the book, so unless he reads it, he's not going to see that line, but that's a very funny line. You and Senators Cotton, Cruz, and Lee, I've decided, should have a book club about the Dormant Commerce Clause of the 11th Amendment. I did not realize you had spent this much time practicing law, learning law, and conflicts of law at Oxford. What were you thinking when you signed up for Sir John Morris?
Well, Sir John he's passed, but he was the leading authority in the world on the conflicts of laws. I had another professor named Sir Rupert Cross. He's now deceased, but he was the leading expert in the world on evidence. But look, I practiced law a long time, but I also taught law for 15 years, part-time at LSU Law School. So I like the law. It's
well, I do too, and I teach part-time, but I teach constitutional law, so I can pretend to know whatever issue comes up. I did last night. When I'm going to ask you this, you're a con law lawyer. President has taken out the drug cartel boats. This does not bother me in the least. The commander-in-chief power has some limits in some areas, but that's not one of the areas in which it's limited. Do you agree with me?
Yes. And in fact, I had lunch with Marco Rubio. Several of us did in the Senate. I don't know, it's been about 3 weeks ago. And Senator, still call him Senator Marco, but the secretary is a good lawyer. We asked him, I said, are you on solid legal ground? He said, absolutely. We've researched this thing exhaustively, and attacking these narco-terrorists after being declared to be terrorists is perfectly legal. I asked him how certain they were that these were actually narco-terrorists. He said, well, I can't explain or tell you about all of our intelligence, but he said, I am 110% certain that these guys are narco-terrorists. And our American intelligence is pretty good.
Oh, our signal intelligence is very good. And who knows, we might have someone inside the cartel. I'm just glad to hear you say that. Now I want to go back to
Marco did say this to us, Hugh. Sorry to interrupt. Marco did say this to us in his typical way. Marco can be humorous himself. He said, and by the way, boat traffic is way, way down. And so I thought that
I think probably the prices on used boats is way, way up right now.
Yeah.
Let me talk to you about Zachary. I thought maybe Zachary, Louisiana had been named after President Zachary Taylor. It turns out I looked it up. It's named after Darrell Zachary, who founded it. It sounds a little idyllic. 20,000 people. You're one of 4 boys, 2 doctors. Your brother George is the smart one. Did you embarrass your parents when you went into the law and politics?
Well, my dad particularly didn't want me to go into politics. Zachary, when I grew up, it's about 20,000 people now, but when I grew up, it was about 3,000 people. It was small, one stoplight. The town was so small. I talk about this in the book. We didn't have a town drunk. Several people had to take turns. Everybody knew everybody. But look, I loved growing up in Zachary. And when I was in high school, I cared about two things: basketball and cheerleaders. And I wasn't very good at either one, but I had fun trying, and I'd go back in a nanosecond.
Well, I think it's a fabulous look at, I think I was born in the best year, 1956. You got a year on me or so. But we were blessed to grow up in a kind of sane era, or be born under Eisenhower and live in a sane area. I got to tell you, 3 and 4 weeks ago, I did 2 interviews with Justice Barrett. She's from Nolens, and she made careful to make me understand that New Orleans people are not from the South. They're from New Orleans. Now, you dwell on that a little bit in How to Test Negative for Stupid and Why Washington Never Will. Did that come up in her confirmation back and forth with you? Because I'm glad we've got a couple of people from outside the Beltway on the court.
Yes, it did. And let me say, the justice is absolutely brilliant. And she's been a good justice and will continue to be. She went through 3 days of a tough hearing without a single note. We did talk a little bit about New Orleans. New Orleans is, it's unlike any other city in America. It's very European. It's very liberal. It's this liberal place in the middle of a very conservative state. I love New Orleans. It's like a box of chocolates, you know. You never know what you're going to get when you go down there. Now, it's got a lot of problems. It's got crime problems. It's a sanctuary city. The political leadership is to the left of Lenin. It's got an awful lot of problems, but it's a wonderful city.
You quote Tennessee Williams, and you try and excuse yourself for quoting him, but I want people to hear this. America has only 3 cities: New York, San Francisco, and Nolens. Everything else is Cleveland. Parentheses from Senator Kennedy. If you're from Cleveland, like I am, Senator, I'm from Warren, which is Cleveland adjacent. Get mad at Tennessee, not me. He said it. Well, you didn't have to put it in the book, Senator.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty clever quip from Tennessee Williams. I mean, I will say this about Cleveland. I've been to Cleveland. I like Cleveland. Cleveland Clinic is one of the best examples of our healthcare delivery system in the world.
All right, let's pause right there. We'll come back. There's more, and it's all over at my YouTube channel. I would love to ask each of you, when you have a chance, go over to my YouTube channel, Hugh Hewitt YouTube. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. I'm not going to steal the Ruthless Podcast. If you wish to opine, I read the comments anyway for the people who like and subscribe. But I don't read them on the air, and I'm not going to do that. I listened, by the way, to the Ruthless Podcast today. Brett Baer joined it. And I asked Dwayne to go get and Adam to put into my permanent record the cold read that Brett Baer did when he guest. He was the ride-along guest today on Ruthless Podcast. And that is in my cut sheet somewhere. That I made sure I included it. And now I can't find it because it's number 7.
Welcome to Washington. I'm Brett Baer. Tonight, I attempt to give 4 idiots a history lesson. This is definitely not Special Report. Is that good?
All right. That is pretty magnificent. That is pretty magnificent. The only thing that I have to compare to that, we burned. And Dwayne knows what I'm talking about with a former high-ranking official in Washington, D.C. when we pranked him on April 1st, and we'll never tell about it on the air, but it was pretty good. Let me tell you about Consumer Cellular, one of our sponsors. If you listened yesterday, Ed Evans was my guest. He's the CEO of Consumer Cellular. You can reach Consumer Cellular at 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454, or you can go to consumercellular.com/Hugh. Ed Evans should have persuaded you that if you're 50 and older, everybody ought to call Consumer Cellular because they do great customer service. It's U.S. based. Their rates are wonderful, but if you're over 50, their rates are extraordinary, and you just don't use the same amount of data as youngs do. So give them a call and make this. Takes 20 minutes. All right, takes 20 minutes. Ed Evans also went through why there is no such thing as a free phone. Give them a call, 1-800-411-4454. Remember my code HUGH25. That'll get you $5 off a month for each of your first 5 months of service with Consumer Cellular. But mostly sign up for the 2 lines of unlimited data for $60 a month if you're 50 and older. Make the switch. Takes 20 minutes. You'll love the customer service at consumercellular.com/Hugh. That's consumercellular.com/Hugh. I want to return to my interview with Senator John Kennedy. Before I do, I want to remind everyone the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is sponsoring on my program, many other programs, an appeal for people to help out the people of Israel. IFCJ has been at work there for 2 years of long, long war, and people are exhausted. A lot of families are recovering from injuries. A lot of individuals are recovering from their businesses not being tended to for 2 years because reservists have gone back 6, 7, 8 times. Soup kitchens are full. A lot of resiliency center use. The IFCJ is a good steward of your funds if you want to help Israel rebound from the long war, the longest war in its history. Go find at the top of HughHewitt.com the blue banner bar that you cannot miss, even if you're a Steelers fan. And right now, your donations will be doubled due to the generosity of an IFCJ donor. So please head over to HughHewitt.com and be as generous as you can, and it's all tax deductible. Back to my conversation with Senator John Kennedy about his brand new book. You are absolutely right. There's a reason everybody with heart trouble goes to Cleveland. Now let's get serious. I want to begin with Billy. Billy is the guy that took you 2 punches to take him out of the bully business, and then you follow up with the line, weakness invites the wolves. It's a good story. I encourage people to read it. Let's jump from there to Xi Jinping, because I don't know a lot of people who've sat across from Xi Jinping and spoken to him as directly as you did. You say in the book that you memorized it, but you encouraged him to be responsible. You also gave I didn't realize he was overweight, and I didn't realize he was surrounded like Emperor Xi sort of stuff. Do you think you got through to him?
I think we got through to him. I don't know that we changed him. Most of the conflicts throughout the world today are orchestrated by President Xi Jinping. Xi is working with Putin in Russia, with the Ayatollahs in Iran. The quarterback is Xi. Their goal is to have Russia dominate Central and Eastern Europe, to have Iran dominate the Middle East, to have China dominate the Indo-Pacific, Sub-Saharan Africa, and South America. They just didn't factor one thing into their equation: President Trump. He understands that weakness invites the wolf. I do not want America to be the world's policeman, but I don't want Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin or Iran to be either. That's not a world that's safe for Western democracy. They started this effort under President Biden, who was weak as rainwater. He would send his people in there. We were in the middle of a bar fight, and they'd try to quote Socrates. President Trump doesn't do it that way. He makes them understand that we're the most powerful country in all of human history, and we're going to act that way.
Speaking of President Trump, are you alarmed by our ongoing constitutional crisis of the remodel of the East Wing? I am not. I just want to make sure it's okay with you. You're on Judiciary.
Well, I thought Senator Hawley put it best. Josh is a very, very clever guy. One of the liberal media jumped him and said, "Oh, you're destroying history by building a ballroom in the White House." And Josh just leveled him. He said, "Let me get this straight. You people have torn down every statute you can get your hands on in America throughout the world because you didn't like their politics. And you want to talk to us about respect for history? Look, this is what's going on. The ballroom in the White House, the current one, only seats about 80 or 90 people. I've been to a state dinner there. You're packed in like sardines. You have to put up tents outside. It's embarrassing. So the president, like Truman, like Teddy Roosevelt, like a lot of other presidents, President John Kennedy, he made changes. He said, at his expense and at the expense of the private sector, no taxpayer money, he's building a ballroom to house more people, and I think it's a splendid idea. Now, all the members of the liberal media, all of my Democratic friends have their bowels in an uproar over this, but it's totally hypocritical. If it weren't for double standards in Washington, there wouldn't be any standards at all.
Yeah, I want the audience to know President Obama had a $300 million construction project as well at the White House. Sometimes we do not know what's there. I worked there in the 80s, and there are parts of it that people do not know about for national security reasons. And having a ballroom is exactly what Senator Kennedy said. It's an embarrassment, actually, to host a state dinner in a tent. And the East Room does hold about 150 people if you jam them in. So this is good. I want to go to a couple of the things that you said here specifically, but I had a chance last night to run into one of your more unusual colleagues, Senator Fetterman, for the first time. Senator Fetterman is a friend of Selena Zito, so he's my friend. I like Selena a lot. You became a Republican after being a Democrat in a state that went increasingly Republican. Any chance you can convert Senator Fetterman?
Oh, we try repeatedly. Look, John is an independent thinker. That's what many of his colleagues don't like about him. He takes it issue by issue, and he says exactly what he means. He's a little bit like me. We both play outside the pocket. God gave both of us the right to remain silent, but not the ability. I find John refreshing, and not just, I find him refreshing even when I disagree with him. And he's very popular in Pennsylvania. Now, the Democrats will show you poll numbers, but they're only polling the loon wing of the Democratic Party. Among the loon wing of the Democratic Party, yeah, he's not popular. But among Pennsylvanians at large, he's very popular.
There's more coming up. Don't go anywhere. It's all posted now. Harley's put it up at my YouTube channel. This is a fabulous book, How to Test Negative for Stupid. And I'll try and play a little bit in the next segment. I do want to tell you about WebRoot Total Protection. Because we're in October, Halloween is coming, and people are trying on costumes already. It's supposed to be the scariest month. The thing that ought to scare you is being online. Text scams, data breaches, it's hard to keep up. The Cyber Scaries Month is what we should call it, and the answer to being scared legitimately about being hacked is WebRoot Total Protection. All-in-one product for individuals, one identity, 5 devices. For families, up to 10 identities and 10 devices. Lightning-fast antivirus protection, identity theft protection, advanced dark web monitoring, U.S.-based customer support 24/7, new text scam detection. It's all there, and it's 60% off for a limited time right now when you visit webroot.com/Hewitt. Celebrate Cyber Scaries Month in confidence with WebRoot Total Protection today. And not a day goes by that I don't see another data hack. And when AI comes along and begins to take all of the information on the dark web about you, and there's a lot, and combine it with all of the data that if you're a Republican, Democrats give willingly from the FBI to any left-wing crusader in a cape with a prosecutor P on it, you're going to be at risk. Get WebRoot Total Protection, webroot.com/Hewitt, 60% off this month. webroot.com/Hewitt. Ask for the total protection, get 60% off. I'm in the Relief Factor studio. There's the bag. I took it in the first hour. I want you to give it a try, especially if you're a weekend warrior. Well, actually, if you have any kind of minor aches and pains at all, or you want to prevent them from occurring. I have been out and about for my 3 miles today, and the hamstring's still a little bit tight, but I got my 3 miles in, and got to amp it up next week, and I'm taking my Relief Factor to make sure I don't go backwards in the recovery. Pulled it 2 weeks ago and doing better, but I take it every day. I tripled down on it, then doubled down on it. Now I'm back to 1 and starting back up on the mileage. So I want to tell you it works. It really does work. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, or go directly to the website, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. $19.95 for a 3-week starter pack. It's less than $1 a day. You'll love it. Relieffactor.com. Now, I was on special report last night with Brett Baer. I'm going to be on tonight with Shannon Broom, back-to-back. Shannon Bream. And I just want to go back over with a short segment because Governor Pritzker was in. Good interview by Brett, hard-hitting. And at the end of it, panel comes in, and Kevin and Annie and I, and Brett starts with me, and he asked me about the Pritzker conversation, and I respond with cut number 1.
Okay, Hugh, your thoughts?
Governor Pritzker is running. He's not running very well.
100% he's running.
He's absolutely running, and he's not running well because nothing made any sense. It's all, you present him with statements, he contradicts himself. When he brought up Pinochet, I laughed out loud in the green room because it's such an absurd argument. It's such a bad reach. So he is playing the far left wing of his party, though he denied it to you. Good hard-hitting questions. He's not very good at this. And he can only win in Illinois with a billionaire's money. That's it.
Okay, Hugh, your thoughts?
And we got a second round on Pritzker, cut number 2.
And on the crime issue, I mean, it's clear there is a problem in Chicago.
There's a reason people are leaving Illinois. It's not just the taxes. One fact you can't argue with. Illinois is going to lose 2 congressional seats in the next census. I'm going to go from 17 to 15 because people are fleeing Illinois because of taxes, crimes, and the fact that there's violence around every corner. And the governor wants to run on that, fine, but as Andy just pointed out, it's not enough to assert a different reality. Using the old alternative facts, they're not very persuasive. It was very bizarre. I thought Pritzker was trying to maybe take a turn on the big stage, and he's not very good at it. Big men should not try ballet. Then we got around to the blowing up of the narco boats, and President Trump is right on target here. He's absolutely within his power. Cut number 3.
About tough on drug cartels and boats in the Caribbean and the Pacific.
I'm very comfortable with this. There are limits and areas the commander-in-chief power does not extend to. This is not one of them. I've been teaching constitutional law for 3 decades, and the president can take out weapons of mass destruction at will, and fentanyl is a WMD. Ask the parents of everyone who has been killed by it. And then we got to the ballroom. Cut number 4.
Kevin, are you energized and upset about the East Wing renovation with the ballroom?
I think there's bigger fish to fry. Our government is still shut down day 22 or 23 of the struggle. We're going to see premiums go up. We're going to see the SNAP benefit issue that you highlighted earlier in the show. So I think this is a sideshow. Even though I think this is actually breaking through with a good part of the electorate when they see bulldozers taking it to the White House and the optics of that.
Yeah, it's optics.
It's all optics.
Carolyn Levitt brought pictures, though, to the podium today. What Donald Trump is doing at the end will be applauded by every future president because the White House will finally have room to have a state dinner above 200 people. It's just going to be, I hope I make this point again tonight. Everybody who's ever worked there knows what an absurd story this is. The East Wing has not got significance. It's basically like the long lines at Disneyland. When the tourists come in, they come in through the East Wing. They go through metal detector after metal detector. They go by display case by display case. There are some officers for the First Lady's staff. The senior staff is in the West Wing. The junior staff is in the old executive office building. Nothing's being touched there. It's the silliest thing. But the gambling special is not the silliest thing. Cut number 5.
Finally, anybody want to weigh in on this sports, this massive ring that they've busted on sports betting and poker?
I'll tell you off the top, I spent 3 hours on the radio today talking about this because it's an enormous story. It's a gigantic story. And the 4 crime families named, I haven't heard since Rudy Giuliani was U.S. Attorney in New York. So out of nowhere comes this enormous Godfather and the NBA. There is no bigger story tomorrow. And I still remain, I've been thinking about it, and I'm mostly, it may come up tonight, I have been thinking about the fact that the NBA, Major League Baseball, the NFL, they can take care of their athletes, and the athletes have a lot to lose. The vulnerability is in college sports with marginal athletes who aren't going to make money as professional athletes when they're done playing their sports. That's the biggest vulnerability. I think this is my favorite segment of the week during football season. Doug Lesmerises joins me. He's one of the co-hosts of the Bill and Doug Show, along with Bill Landis. There are free episodes of the Bill and Doug Show at every podcast platform in America. But if you're smart and if you love college football, their Substack subscription is more than worth it, the equal of any college coverage anywhere. Doug, Ohio State has a bye, so I don't know what to look for as number one. What's your number one game this weekend?
The number one game is Texas A&M, one of the 6 remaining unbeaten teams, Hugh, the only unbeaten team in the SEC. They're at LSU, 7:30 on Saturday night. This is only about a field goal game. LSU's coming off a loss to Vanderbilt. They're playing number 3 Texas A&M this week. Their next game is against number 4 Alabama. Like LSU, Brian Kelly, remember Brian Kelly, the Notre Dame coach?
Oh, yeah, Notre Dame.
Who went to LSU. Yeah. He went to LSU in part because he wasn't sure he could win a national title at Notre Dame. He's in his 4th year at LSU. They were a dark horse national title pick for some people. They're already 5-2. They have 2 tough ones ahead. If they have another 4-loss season, I don't know about Brian Kelly's future. So this is big for Texas A&M. It's big for LSU because if you remember, Notre Dame made the national title game last year without Brian Kelly. So this is a good one.
Doug, what is your? I love 7:30 starts when I'm with my 10-year-old grandson, so we can watch him. Normally, I'm a big noon kickoff guy, but I love a 7:30 start because I can watch it with my 10-year-old. Do you like the 7:30 starts?
I do think sometimes when you're in the building, especially, Hugh, there's something like under the lights gives you a vibe, right? A lot of times they're shooting off fireworks and stuff. So, like, I get that from that perspective. I will say this. Fall Saturdays are valuable. I know there's plenty of people watching and listening to this right now who just want to watch nothing but college football on Saturdays.
Correct.
But if you either go noon or 7:30, then you can do something else that day. If it's 7:30, you can go to a pumpkin patch in the afternoon. If it's at noon, you can go out to dinner at night. Those 3:30 games, Hugh, that's what gets you because it blows your whole day. So I kind of like the two ends, noon or night.
Gospel. All right, what's next up on the menu?
So we want to talk about the big game in the NFL, Hugh. And this is one of these rare circumstances. You have an absolute legend of the NFL who is going to play the team that made him a legend, that he helped elevate, and he's on the other team. This is Aaron Rodgers of the Pittsburgh Steelers playing at the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers was the starting quarterback in Green Bay for 15 years. He spent the last 2 years in New York. He never played the Packers then. Now he's the quarterback in Pittsburgh, and he's going back to Green Bay. And this is like one of those things, you right? Like, he'll always be remembered as a Packer, but he's going to be in the opposite locker room now. So this happened in 2009. Brett Favre, legendary Packer, went back to Green Bay as a member of the Minnesota Vikings. Brett Favre threw 3 touchdowns in that game. Minnesota beat Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers. Now it's Aaron Rodgers on the other side going home to Lambeau Field. It's Sunday night, 8:20. It's the Sunday night game. Just at least watch the pregame show to watch these Packer fans react to Aaron Rodgers coming home.
Do you remember, did the Packers fan boo Brett in 2009? I can't remember.
I think the Favre stuff was a little more acrimonious than this is at the moment. I can't remember either. You know, it's just this stunning thing. The Packers have actually managed this to go from Favre to Aaron Rodgers and now to Jordan Love. They've had this veteran quarterback. They bring in a young guy. The young guy sits for a couple years. Then they kind of say goodbye to the veteran and bring in the young guy. It's worked twice now. It's a great system in Green Bay, and the result is they've had great quarterback play for 3 decades. You know, like the Browns would. The Browns are jealous of that, Hugh. So I hope this is one of those things. Sometimes endings are hard, Hugh, in life and in sports. But hopefully, whatever it is, you don't let the ending take away from the 15 great years you had together. I think they'll be cheering Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, that's right. I got to tell you a quick story, a D.C. story. Last night, I went to a book party, and the classic D.C. thing, and I'm introduced by the Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum, to a guy he was talking with. He said, do you know X, Y, and Z? And I didn't know. It's the Washington Commanders, Jimmy Haslam, the owner of the Commanders, and I didn't get his name.
Oh, yeah. Josh Harris, right?
Well, yeah, nice guy, wonderful guy. I asked him to trade their quarterback to the Browns. He said, that's not happening. You've got a couple. I said, I'm not really sure about it. So Doug Lesmerises, what do you think of Dylan Gabriel thus far?
Oh, do you want to know what I actually think?
Oh, yes.
This is what I actually think. I think they drafted him to be the long-term backup, which is not a bad idea. I think a third-round pick is worth that. I don't think Dylan Gabriel. No, I don't have any doubt. Dylan Gabriel is not a starting quarterback in the NFL, but the backup quarterback is a very valuable piece of any roster. So I think they drafted him this year knowing they're going to draft another quarterback next year, and that guy's the quarterback of the future. Or the dice roll on Shedeur Sanders, maybe he's the quarterback of the future. I think Dylan Gabriel is the backup quarterback of the future, and they're just getting him some reps right now. No offense to Dylan Gabriel. He's not a Super Bowl quarterback. They can't settle on him.
Have you heard it? Maybe I heard it on your show. His average, or I heard it on the Orange and Brown Talk, his average throw downfield is less than 6 yards in his 3 starts. So he can't throw downfield.
That's what he did at Oregon. That's what he did at Oregon. That Oregon offense works that way, and he's like a quick processor. He's a smaller guy. He can move around a little bit, but I'm not sure he has an NFL arm. I like a starting quarterback NFL arm. You've got to make throws down the field, and so that's why I think if in an emergency situation, come in and run the offense when somebody gets hurt or something goes wrong, great. You cannot invest your long-term future in Dylan Gabriel. So I'm not surprised by that because that's what he's always been.
That's a very good take. Now, quick question for you about the NBA gambling scandal. I got to go do a special report tonight. I think I'm going to bring up the fact that the gambling scandal makes me worried for colleges a lot more than the big leagues. The big leagues can police their people. The athletes have a lot more to lose. But the marginal college player, how worried are you, Doug, that the mafia is going for that weak link?
Yeah, it's hard. One of the things is that college players are getting paid now, so there's less of that, right? But it's still obviously, it could be a temptation, Hugh. The thing that I think is very reasonable is what's happening with the NBA stuff is some of these individual player bets. You are betting on an individual player to score this many points or get that many rebounds. It's not even a team outcome. For instance, in the state of Ohio, you cannot bet on individual college athlete performance. I cannot bet. They passed a law. They used to be able to, and now you can't. I cannot bet that Jeremiah Smith will have 100 yards receiving for Ohio State. In the state of Ohio, I can still bet on will Ohio State win. I think we could get to a place where gambling is still legal, but bet on the games, not individual player performance, and that would help.
That would help a lot. Doug Lesmerises, always a pleasure. Follow him on X at Doug Lesmerises. The Bill and Doug Show. There are free podcasts at every podcast platform for The Bill and Doug Show. Their Substack is Bill and Doug Show, OSU.substack.com. The poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe, is in the house. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. You know, of your top 3 stories, I wrote on story number 3. Through Washington's most storied home, wherein the ghosts of purpose roam, I hear first ladies, fine and fair, take note of changes in the air. The walls of their beloved mansion reverberate with new expansion. Abigail is first to speak. She barely lived there for a week. Perhaps the building's finest spouse she fought with an unfinished house. I think we all deserve a new room. I hung my laundry in the blue room. Now listen to beloved Bess. When I lived there, it was a mess. With renovation incomplete, we had to move across the street. And Ladybird, she beams with pride to see the building beautified. These critics are all false and phony, says Dolly M., who served Spumoni. Even Jill has time to vent. When I ran things, we pitched a tent, and those things cost a lot to rent. They all agree. By gosh, by God, there goes a smiling Mary Todd. This is the room the old barn needed. With it, the South wouldn't have seceded. I know that Edith Wilson thinks a ballroom would be fun, but she didn't have time to comment. There's a government to run. From those who pull down statues, never Trumpers in the squad, I find it so amazing that they weep for a facade. That's The Ballroom and a Little History by Tarzana Joe.
There's a lot of history in The Ballroom and a Little History by Tarzana Joe. That will be at tarzanajoe.com as we speak, I hope.
Yes, sir.
I think that's going to get a lot of traction, Joe, because this is the silliest story, but it's also got eyeballs on top of eyeballs because it's triggered the left, and they don't know anything about history, and they won't even know who Dolly M is. They'll think that's the little Dolly donuts at the end of the aisle in the convenience store. And by the way, there might be some trademark issues there. TarzanaJoe.com. How's business, Joe, in the Octobers of our season?
Booming, wonderful business. I can't thank the Hugh Hewitt audience enough.
Well, everybody needs poetry. Is this relative to October's past picking up like the market?
Actually, I'm actually in a little lull at the end of the month, but I have a lot of due dates in November and December, and so I like to be early. I don't like to be late.
Okay, so Q4 will be great, not late. Thank you, Joe. Go to TarzanaJoe.com. If you want a poem, hit the I Need a Poem button with your cursor, and you will get in touch with Joe. Rates are reasonable. In fact, I think he ought to have raised them a long time ago. Get in before he does. I'll be right back. Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, and I are diving back into Winston Churchill's The Gathering Storm. You don't want to miss that. During the break, you can go over to my YouTube channel if you want to listen to the rest of the Senator Kennedy interview about this book, How to Test Negative for Stupid. It's now posted over there. When you do that, please like and subscribe the YouTube channel. Do me that favor, please. Like and subscribe over at YouTube. Hugh Hewitt.